All right, so you are studying for the PMP exam. You run across some questions and you're not exactly sure how to actually get them right. So, let's go and walk through some of those. And we did post this up on a social media post. We're going to get to that in just a moment. In the meantime, welcome back to another episode of John the PM, where we believe that managing projects is not just a job, but a way of life. All right, so let's get back to that question here, and I am going to read it. The question is, your project is in the execution phase when a key stakeholder requests a new reporting feature. The stakeholder insists the team begin work immediately. What should the project manager do first? I am going to enunciate on that word first. That doesn't mean second, third, fourth, or what you will eventually do. It is what you will do first. And again, I would probably preface that as a professional project manager, meaning that not only do you do things by the book and things, but that you're actually effective. You use the processes. Why? Because they actually do work. All right, so let's go into part of the answers A, B, C, or D. A, instruct the team to begin work immediately. B, ask the project sponsor if the work should be added. C, explain that no work should begin until the requested change has been formally reviewed and approved through the project's change control process. Or D, add the work to the project backlog for later. I'm going to give you a second or two just to kind of think about it. A, B, C, or D. All right, now welcome back. The correct answer is going to be C, Charlie. And if you did pick Charlie, C, then that kind of means that you are thinking like a project manager. So again, C was explained that no work should begin until the requested change has been formally reviewed and approved through the project's change control process. I am going to add some context to that here in just a moment, but I do want to talk through why the other three are or should be incorrect. Letter A, instruct the team to begin work immediately. I do actually kind of get that. I understand that. Big boss, you're on a job site or something, big boss or, whoever comes by and say, hey, go ahead and take care of that right now. And so the teams just start working. That could be problematic, okay, on those areas. I presume as a professional that you would have set up the change control processes at the beginning of the project, and therefore you ought to be using the policies that you have developed and executed throughout the remainder of the project. So I can kind of understand why, in the moment you just like want to do something, kind of like a knee jerk reaction. But again, all of these should have really been decided up front. Again, as part of your ground rules, could be even in contract, just as a matter of fact, what you should do. B, why is B incorrect? Just to reiterate, B is ask the project sponsor if the work should be added. Again, I kind of understand this. Human nature. Again, the big boss said, "Hey, do it." It's almost presumed that everything has been approved. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I actually have to go back to again, like I just said earlier. What were the ground rules? What were the contractual obligations? People will let you do the work and then not pay you. So even if the big boss, says, meaning the sponsor, the individual or a group that's actually paying for it and things of that nature, you may want to kind of review your processes and make sure that you're not violating that in regards. Okay. So again, you do want to go back to your policies, back to your processes and utilize them. Just as a happenstance, if this happens quite frequently or something and you actually do something different, you can change your processes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. To either better reflect reality or to make sure that you haven't put in some kind of a constraint, bottleneck. On those areas. Again, thinking of theories of constraints. And sometimes policies and procedures, or at least certain ones of them, can actually be the bottleneck. So again, I'm not advocating one way or the other. Basically, I'm saying go back to your own rules and follow them. And you know what? If you don't like your rules, change them, but do it properly. D, it said add the work to the project backlog for later. From a testing perspective, this really only kind of answers half of it. So you have adaptive, and then you have traditional. On that side, product backlogs on the adaptive side. Now, I could argue that through the question, it says feature, and so right away that you kind of start thinking about adaptive formats anyway. Sometimes we call them agile as well, but in this setting, we're going to call them adaptive. So in one sense, it only really answers like half of the issue. Now, let's talk about this backlog here for a second. Backlog at the end of the day is your to-do list. Okay, product backlog is your to-do list for the entire product. Sprint backlog or iteration backlog is the work that your to-do list for that sprint or for that iteration. So, kind of think about it that way. Just because something is in the product backlog does not mean that it will ever get done. It literally doesn't mean that. At the appropriate time, you'll come back and you'll groom and refine. Some people will say rack and stack. Other people will say reprioritize. Whatever the verbiage that you want to use on that side, the team, along with the product owner, decides which features are going to be done first, second, third, or fourth. So again, just because it's in a product backlog doesn't mean it's actually going to get done. And when you do go back and evaluate it, you are actually evaluating if it's appropriate, at the appropriate time. All right, so hopefully we kind of answered the correct answer was C. Explain that no work should begin until the requested change has been formally reviewed and approved through the project's change control processes. I've already kind of hinted at this. I'm just reiterating. You, your team, are responsible for developing your own processes, change control processes for your project. Presumably, at the very beginning, you have established that. The question now becomes, can you change your own processes? The answer is yes, in accordance to whatever your policies and procedures are. You can make your change control processes as straightforward as you like, or you can make them as laborious as you like. Uh, it's neither right or wrong, to be honest. It's just really situationally dependent. In one group that I had the fortune of working with, the way that we handle changes, on a job site, and just to kind of set the scenario, we did like these gray collar work, gray collar construction work, where we did installations and things of that nature. So a lot of times the crews were on customer site. And we were not working through a general contractor, in these particular situations. But when we had a direct with the owner, oftentimes the point of contact at the site and at the location would make a change and so forth. And at the very beginning of my tenure there, what would happen is that they would call back to the office, say, "Hey, big boss, can we get this done?" And I usually always default back to whatever they said. So we held a meeting because honestly, I was getting kind of tired of getting all these callbacks. And what we decided was the following format. Hey, if you see something on the job site that can easily be done, and let's say it's less than a day's work, what? Just make the decision and we'll live with it. You know what our core values are. You know what we're trying to accomplish. You'll factor all those pieces in. Let's say that it was 2 or 3 days work. What we would ask you to do is call back to the office, and someone at the office will pick up the phone. And basically, we just had a worksheet, question and answer, and we would ask you a series of questions. Now, you still made the final decision. The crews still make the final decision. We're just making sure that you have thought about everything. And whatever decision you made, we're just simply going to move with it and move on. Now, if it was more than 4 or 5 days work, the answer was kind of like no. You just need to come back to the office because we have missed something, within those areas. So therefore, we need to kind of like really double check what is the correct movement and things of that nature, so that we can move forward. You know what? That kind of worked for us. That kind of gave people a sense of empowerment, on the job ownership. Certainly reduced my workload. Presumably, we had a good hiring process. We had a good training process. We had good culture. So, so some of those were, kind of factored in, work for us. Now, if we work for a general contractor, Honestly, we had to do whatever the general contractor said, and a lot of times it was a formal change control process, meaning a sheet of paper with change orders and things and levels of approvals. Ultimately, by the owner of the asset. And as one of my favorite general contractors, they said, you know what, you are free to do whatever you like, make whatever changes you want, but if you didn't get it approved, you will not get paid. Yeah, you know what? Well, everybody understood. And by the way, they were really good contractors, general contractors. Love working with them, just as a matter of fact. So, hey, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of John the PM and helping you to pass the PMP exam. More importantly, we want you to be successful in all of your projects. If you like this episode, please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. It helps us to be a better service back to you. In the meantime, may you be successful in all of your endeavors.